Why did Caraxes attack Silverwing? House of the Dragon Season 3, Episode 8 explained. Warning: this video contains major spoilers for House of the Dragon Season 3, Episode 8, including the Battle of Tumbleton, Ulf's betrayal, Silverwing's rampage, and the fate of the dragons involved. One of the most confusing moments in the House of the Dragon Season 3 finale happens right after the chaos at Tumbleton. Ulf the White suddenly turns Silverwing against the very army he was supposed to fight alongside. Silverwing begins attacking the battlefield. Then, near the end of the sequence, we see Caraxes pursuing Silverwing through the sky. And that's where many viewers started asking, why did Caraxes attack Silverwing? Was Daemon trying to kill Ulf? Was Caraxes defending the Black Army? Why didn't Caraxes attack Silverwing earlier? And, perhaps most importantly, why does Vermithor follow them? The scene is surprisingly complicated because the dragons are not behaving like ordinary soldiers receiving commands from a battlefield. So let's break down exactly what happened. 1. Silverwing was originally on Rhaenyra's side. To understand Caraxes' reaction, we first need to remember who Silverwing is. Silverwing is one of the dragons claimed by the dragon seeds recruited by Rhaenyra. She is claimed by Ulf the White. That means Silverwing is initially fighting for Rhaenyra's side. Along with Vermithor, she gives Rhaenyra an enormous advantage. These aren't small or inexperienced dragons. Silverwing is large and powerful, while Vermithor is one of the oldest and strongest dragons still alive. For the Black faction, gaining these two dragons was a huge military victory. But there was always one major problem. Their riders were not experienced Targaryen warriors, and that becomes extremely important at Tumbleton. 2. Ulf suddenly turns against the Blacks. During the Battle of Tumbleton, everything falls apart. Ulf has been given enormous power, but he is also unpredictable. Instead of remaining loyal to Rhaenyra, he turns against the Black forces. And because he has Silverwing, his betrayal immediately becomes catastrophic. Silverwing is no longer simply a dragon supporting the Blacks. She becomes a weapon being used against them. The battlefield descends into complete chaos. Men who were fighting alongside Silverwing suddenly become targets. And the Black Army has to deal with the horrifying reality that one of its own dragons is attacking it. This is why Caraxes eventually becomes involved. From the perspective of the Black forces, Silverwing is no longer an ally. She is now an enemy dragon. 3. Why does Caraxes go after Silverwing? The simplest explanation is Caraxes recognizes Silverwing as a threat. Once Silverwing begins attacking the Black forces, the situation changes. Caraxes is Daemon Targaryen's dragon and one of the most experienced dragons in the dance. He has already fought in major battles. He has killed dragons before. And unlike many of the younger dragons, Caraxes has extensive experience in combat. So when Silverwing turns hostile, Caraxes' pursuit makes sense as a defensive response. He's not necessarily attacking Silverwing because he suddenly hates her. He's responding to an enemy dragon threatening his side. The finale doesn't give us a scene where Daemon explicitly says Caraxes attacks Silverwing, and that's important. The dragons are intelligent creatures. They don't necessarily need a spoken command every time they react to another dragon. 4. Was Daemon actually riding Caraxes? This is one of the reasons the scene confused so many viewers. At this point in the battle, the dragons are moving around amid complete chaos. Daemon is involved in the fighting at Tumbleton, but the sequence gives us limited information about exactly when each rider is mounted or dismounted. The important point is that Caraxes is pursuing Silverwing, whether directly commanded or reacting instinctively to the threat. The show doesn't stop to explain the mechanics. Instead, it cuts quickly between the battlefield, the dragons, and the destruction happening around Tumbleton. That's why viewers have been debating what exactly happened. Some viewers interpreted Caraxes' pursuit as Daemon ordering the attack. Others see it as Caraxes acting independently once Silverwing became hostile. The episode itself doesn't give us enough dialogue to definitively settle every detail. But the purpose of the scene is much clearer. Silverwing has become a threat, and Caraxes is trying to drive her away. 5. Why didn't Caraxes attack Silverwing immediately? This is probably the biggest question. If Silverwing was attacking black soldiers, why didn't Caraxes immediately stop her? The answer may be connected to the chaos of the battlefield. Tumbleton is not a controlled dragon battle. There are soldiers everywhere, buildings are burning, dragons are moving through the town, and the riders themselves are dealing with their own problems. Ulf's betrayal happens suddenly. Daemon is also dealing with the larger battle and the objective of taking Tumbleton. Caraxes cannot simply dive into the middle of thousands of soldiers without creating even more destruction. Remember, a dragon isn't a precision weapon. If Caraxes breathes fire into a battlefield filled with friendly soldiers, he could kill the very people he's supposed to protect. So the pursuit happens after the immediate chaos has already unfolded. By the time Caraxes goes after Silverwing, the priority appears to be pushing the rogue dragon away from the battlefield. 6. Caraxes isn't necessarily trying to kill Silverwing. This is another important distinction. The scene looks aggressive. Caraxes chases Silverwing, he breathes fire toward her, and the two dragons appear to be moving against each other. But this doesn't necessarily mean Caraxes is trying to kill Silverwing. It can also be interpreted as driving her away. Think of it as territorial or defensive behavior. Silverwing has attacked the Black Army. Caraxes responds. But the show doesn't give us a prolonged dragon battle. There is no extended fight like the confrontation between Meleys and Sunfire at Rook's Rest. Instead, Caraxes pursues Silverwing and forces her away from the immediate battlefield. That distinction matters because the show appears to want the audience to understand that Caraxes' objective is stopping the threat, not necessarily destroying Silverwing. 7. What about Vermithor? And then we get another confusing detail. Vermithor follows them. This is especially interesting because Vermithor and Silverwing have a long history together. Before the dance, both dragons were associated with the royal family. They were also closely connected through their former riders. In the book's history, Vermithor and Silverwing have a particularly notable relationship. So seeing Vermithor following Silverwing creates an interesting question. Is Vermithor trying to protect her? The show doesn't explicitly answer that, but it's certainly a possible interpretation. Vermithor has just witnessed the chaos at Tumbleton. His rider, Hugh Hammer, is no longer part of the battle in the same way. Silverwing has also become effectively riderless, or separated from Ulf's immediate control. So the three dragons' movements may be driven by instinct rather than a simple military command structure. 8. Does Vermithor love Silverwing? This is where we should separate what the show confirms from what fans are interpreting. Vermithor and Silverwing have a known connection in the wider Targaryen history. Their former riders, King Jaehaerys I and Queen Alysanne, were husband and wife. Because of that history, fans have long interpreted the two dragons as having a special bond. But the show does not explicitly tell us Vermithor is protecting Silverwing because he loves her. That would be an interpretation. What we can say is that the two dragons have an established connection, and their behavior in the finale naturally invites viewers to wonder whether Vermithor is following Silverwing for a reason. The ambiguity makes the scene even more interesting. 9. Why doesn't Vermithor attack Caraxes? If Caraxes is chasing Silverwing, another obvious question is, why doesn't Vermithor attack Caraxes? Again, the show doesn't provide a direct explanation, but several possibilities fit what we see. First, Caraxes isn't necessarily trying to kill Silverwing. He may simply be driving her away. Second, Vermithor may not perceive Caraxes as an immediate threat. Third, Vermithor could be following Silverwing rather than actively joining a fight. And finally, the dragons may simply be reacting instinctively to the rapidly changing situation. This is one of those moments where the show leaves the audience to interpret dragon behavior rather than explaining it through dialogue. Does this change the future of the dragons? Absolutely. The most important thing is that Silverwing survives. Caraxes doesn't kill her, and Vermithor also survives the immediate encounter. That matters because these dragons remain important to the story. The dance is entering its most dangerous stage. The number of surviving dragons is shrinking. Every dragon becomes increasingly valuable. And the fact that Silverwing survives, despite turning against the Blacks, creates another major question for the final season. What happens to her after Tumbleton? Does she remain with Ulf? Does she become riderless? And how will she react to the continuing war? Those questions become especially important because dragons are becoming rarer with every major battle. Final thoughts. So, why did Caraxes attack Silverwing? The simplest answer is that Silverwing had become a threat. Ulf betrayed Rhaenyra and turned Silverwing against the Black forces at Tumbleton. Once that happened, Silverwing was no longer an ally. Caraxes therefore pursued her, apparently trying to drive her away from the battlefield. But the scene doesn't necessarily show a full attempt to kill her. Caraxes chases Silverwing, attacks or threatens her with fire, and eventually the dragons move away from the immediate battle. And that's important because the finale isn't showing another Rook's Rest. It's showing the consequences of the chaos created by Ulf's betrayal. There is also the fascinating presence of Vermithor. He follows the other dragons, creating the possibility that his connection with Silverwing influences his behavior. But the show hasn't explicitly confirmed that Vermithor was protecting Silverwing, so that part remains interpretation. What we do know is that the dragons are behaving more like living creatures than simple weapons. They have instincts, they have relationships, they react to threats. And sometimes their behavior doesn't fit neatly into the human plan surrounding them. That's exactly what makes this scene so interesting. Rhaenyra thought that gaining Silverwing and Vermithor would give her control over the war. But at Tumbleton, that power becomes unpredictable. Ulf betrays her. Silverwing turns against the army she was supposed to protect. Caraxes has to respond, and Vermithor follows. Suddenly, the dragons are no longer simply following the political sides humans have created. They're reacting to one another. And that may be the deeper meaning of the scene. The Targaryens believe they control the dragons, but throughout the dance, the dragons repeatedly prove that they have minds and instincts of their own. And with the final season still to come, the biggest question isn't simply which side has more dragons. It's whether anyone can actually control them once the war reaches its final and most brutal stage.